Tash Dile, welcome to Tibet this week. This is Sakina Bhatt. As we celebrate the Tibetan New Year, let's look at the last year's top news. His Holiness the Dalai Lama asserted that in the future, if China chooses the next Dalai Lama, nobody will trust and respect that decision. During interviews with news channels like Reuters and Strat News Global, His Holiness remarked that such step would prove detrimental to Chinese government itself. In many of the meetings and conferences held last year, the Tibetans in exile expressed grave concern over Chinese government's interference in the reincarnation processes of the Tibetan religious leaders, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Tibetans univocally affirmed His Holiness's sole authority in his reincarnation and illegitimized Chinese government's interference in Tibetan religious affairs. During his maiden visit to Central Tibetan administration after renovation, His Holiness reassured that he is in excellent health, indicating that there is still time before the process of reincarnation. The United States Congress affirmed about the sole legitimate and indisputable authority of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to determine his succession and said the US would only follow the instructions laid out by the Dalai Lama with regard to his reincarnation. The U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Samuel Dale Brownback, one of the highest U.S. officials to visit Central Tibetan administration, said that his visit is to send a clear message of United States support to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and his role in picking his succession. Being a firm advocate at the rich ancient Indian understanding of the workings of mind and emotions, His Holiness announced his latest endeavor towards the revival of ancient Indian tradition through establishment of an Institute of Ancient Nalanda Studies near Bodh Gaya, Bihar. Chanting Tara Mantra could be helpful in containing the spread of epidemics like coronavirus, says His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the Buddhist followers, who has sought His Holiness's spiritual advice on ways to contain the spread of coronavirus. The situation inside Tibet in the last year has continued to deteriorate as the Chinese government increased its repression on the Tibetans in every aspect. A young Tibetan nomad named Yonten, aged around 24 in Ngaba County in Tibet, died on 26 November 2019 after setting himself on fire to protest Chinese rule of Tibet and its hardline policies against the Tibetans. Sonam, a Tibetan student from the Northwest Minzo University in Lancho City, was reportedly arrested by the Chinese authorities for decrying lack of government job opportunities for the Tibetan students. Sonam was forcefully taken by the so-called Tibet Education Bureau, and a little is known about his whereabouts. Chinese authorities detained 4 Tibetans for praying for the release of the Panchen Lama in Sherchul County, Karze Prefecture in the traditional Kham province of Tibet. According to news reports, the police confiscated their cell phones and also prevented their family members from visiting them. Sonam Palden, a Tibetan monk from Kirti Monastery in Ngaba County, was arrested last year. Although the exact reasons for Sonam Palden's arrest are not known, it is suspected that his arrest could be linked to his recent WeChat post about the deplorable state of the Tibetan language under Chinese policies. Pema Wangchen from Karzi, who was formerly detained and tortured for singing the Tibetan national anthem in April 2016, passed away last year from prolonged illness sustained through torture suffered while in Chinese police custody 3 years ago. In a similar case, Yeshi Gyatso, a 50-year-old former political prisoner in Tibet and a torture survivor, passed away last year. Yeshi Gyatso was arrested on 31st March 2008 for taking part in the 2008 peaceful protest. He was detained for several months, during which he was tortured and beaten severely. Chinese government imprisoned 21 Tibetans on the pretext of black and evil crimes. The Tibetans were charged with creating hurdles for the government policy, not accepting environmental conservation, compensation, and stopping others from receiving it, and negatively influencing the regular workings of the village and party committee. They were sentenced to varying prison terms from 2 to 6 years in prison and fined from 10,000 to 50,000 yuan. 3 monks Lobsang Thapke, Thopa and Lobsang Dorji from Tibet's Amdo Ngaba region, incorporated into the Chinese province of Sichuan, have disappeared after they were arrested by Chinese authorities in separate incidents. The authorities in Ngaba have sentenced one of the 3 Tibetan monks to 4 years imprisonment, while the other 2 are held in incommunicado detention. A 45-year-old Tibetan Wangchuk was arrested and detained by Chinese police officers. His arrest is suspected to have been linked with his sharing of Tibetan books on the Chinese app WeChat that included some books written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. A 47-year-old Tibetan anti-corruption activist, Anya Sendra, was sentenced for 7 years by the Chinese authorities for allegedly disturbing social order. Chinese authorities detained over 30 Tibetans under a harsh condition on charges of having a so-called suspicious behavior for a fortnight in Zawangpo, eastern Tibet. Chinese authorities in Golok in the traditional Amdo province have ordered all primary and middle schools in the Golok Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture to stop teaching in Tibetan language. They instructed that only the Tibetan language class be taught in Tibetan, whereas the medium of instruction as a whole in the school will be in the Chinese language. Yarchanghar, a major Tibetan Buddhist center in Tibet's Karzai region, is facing eviction once again. Despite international outcry against the forceful removal of practitioners and demolition of Larunghar, Chinese authorities have resumed expulsion of 3,500 Tibetan nuns and monks at Yarchanghar. China stoops another level in carrying out religious persecution of Tibetans. According to the latest report published by Human Rights Watch, an international NGO which conducts research and advocacy of human rights, the Chinese Communist Party has issued a notice banning retired elderly Tibetans from performing circumambulation in monasteries and other religious observances. The Human Rights Watch Report 2020 highlighted the abuse of laws by Chinese authorities in wrongfully arresting and torturing Tibetans who are lawfully asking for the economic and cultural rights, and called the Chinese government a global threat to human rights. In yet another landmark victory for Tibetans and Tibet supporters across the world, the US House of Representatives passed the Tibetan Policy and Support Act with supermajority vote. CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singye thanked the US House for passing the Tibet bill with overwhelming bipartisan support. In the past year, the Central Tibetan Administration has organized a series of meetings and conferences in order to strengthen Tibetan freedom movement and to garner international support for the Tibetan cause. Tibetans and Tibet supporters participated in large numbers in conferences such as the 7th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet, the 2nd 550 Youth Forum, the 3rd Special Meeting of the Tibetans, and the 8th International Tibet Support Group meetings. President Dr. Lobsang Singye extended a warm welcome to US President Donald Trump, who arrived in India along with First Lady Melania Trump on Monday this week. Extending a warm welcome on behalf of the Central Tibetan Administration and the Tibetan people, Dr. Singye also thanked the US government for its unparalleled support for the Tibetan people. In the light of the deteriorating situation inside Tibet, it is extremely encouraging for the US House of Congress to have passed the Tibetan Policy and Support Act with a supermajority bipartisan support within over a year of enacting the reciprocal access to Tibet. The state visit of President Trump is aimed at strengthening the United States-India strategic partnership and highlight the strong and enduring bonds between the American and the Indian people. So much for today. See you next time and have a great weekend.